I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring gas.
These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
It is a Reckless Speculation Thursday across SKOR North podcasts.
Reckless Speculation.
And so Flagrant Howls will dive into the Wolves' speculative weeds here shortly. A really interesting trade idea floated that we should get to, Judd, the sports dad here with Phil Mackey. Mm-hmm. But man, once again, I poured a drink, sat down in a dimly lit room, and watched an NBA Finals game that did not include the Timberwolves last night. Mavericks come out, home court advantage. Here we go, double-digit lead right away. This is the Mavericks team that haunted Timberwolves fans in the Western Conference Finals. And then Boston, who has an incredible roster, even without Porzingis. I mean, Boston just has all these guys who can attack you off the dribble. Defensively, they're tenacious. They can knock down threes at a ridiculous rate. But they decided for the third straight game, even in Dallas, when the momentum and the crowd is going against them, we are going to embarrass Luka Doncic. He's fat. He's out of shape. He's spectacularly talented. But we're going to make his ass work on defense. We're going to go at him on every possession. Yep. We're gonna either make him get out of the way or be slow-footed and pick up fouls. And he fouls out of that game with 4 minutes to go last night. Mm-hmm. He's grabbing his shorts. He's sweating profusely more than he has in any playoff game. And he's bitching at the officials. He's laying on the ground while the Celtics are going 5-on-4 the other way half the game last night. Brian Windhorst, I don't know if you caught that rant.
I torched him. Yeah.
Absolutely eviscerated Luka Doncic. I guess my point here is the Celtics are probably more uniquely equipped to do what they're doing to Luka Doncic. They have more ball handlers. They just have more guys who you can unleash on offense. But like watching this series makes me want a mulligan so bad in the Western Conference Finals for the Timberwolves. It's frustrating to watch from a Wolves perspective what the Celtics are doing to the Mavericks.
So if you're a Wolves fan, this is absolutely the worst case, because if you recall going into the Mavs series, we all talked about the fact that the Timberwolves had this opportunity where this was, they might not have been ready to win a title or contend for one in the finals yet, but like you looked at the path and the path was very, very clear. And then you thought, okay, Dallas looked really good, right? So this is going to be a knockdown, drag out 6 or 7 game series. And we're going to ultimately take a deep breath once we watch the finals and say, okay, yeah, you know what? The Wolves probably didn't belong. And then you watch the Mavericks, and to your point, it's like, but you know what I love too? I love the mind games with Luka. I love the physical nature. This is why I urge, people think it's because I'm a hockey guy, but star players, you got to throw them off. And like Luka, they're doing everything that they can physically, both mentally, everything that they possibly can, right? Mm-hmm. Because he is clearly a head case. Now it goes one of two ways. He can be a head case in like an, oh my God, he's a head case, but he's killing your team, or this version, which is a very different one. So I think this is absolutely the worst case of saying, okay, this was the path. I don't know you beat Boston. Now that's a different conversation.
I think they would have matched up better with Boston than this current Mavs team is.
Right, but they didn't even allow themselves that opportunity because they got beat in 5 games. And like this, yes, the Celtics are built better to handle the Mavs. But this also comes back to what was the plan going into the Western Conference Finals from a coaching standpoint? Because we're definitely seeing some things the Timberwolves could have emulated and 100% did not.
Yeah, it's and again, like, the Celtics just have a lot more dudes that you can say, all right, whoever happens to be handling the ball here with 15 seconds left on the shot clock, Go find Luka in a screen and roll, and like they're just putting him in these impossible situations for him because he's a bad defender and he's slow-footed.
I don't think he's bad. I just think he has no interest in it. Like
he's
last night
tired, dude. He's still tired.
Well, he's tired. He's hurt. He's hurt too. But last night I saw him again pointing at guys and telling them what they should do for their defensive responsibilities because he wasn't going to be, he either wasn't going to be able to or had no desire to do it.
It'd be hard being his teammate because on one hand, he is the central reason why you are a 50-plus win team that pulls out these games, and he's putting up 30-point triple doubles on a regular basis, but you spend half the time either getting bitched at or pointed at or not passed to. And so I don't know. Like I had a visceral reaction as I'm watching that game play out. Just, man, can we run the Western Conference Finals back one more time and just put that dude in a spin cycle more often?
Opportunity lost. So I got a quick theory to run past you two, because we've discussed this quite a bit. It holds true for the hockey and basketball playoffs, but I think we're seeing it with Dallas now, and I think we saw it with the Wolves in the Western Conference Finals. And that is as much fun as it is to watch this as a fan. Like, the playoffs are fun. If your team makes a run, there's no question. The Wolves run was a lot of fun, right? But I think what we need to recognize is the price, the toll it takes. Feels to me like, one, Doncic is definitely banged up. Like, he's not in great shape to start with, and now he's slowed down more. But I guess the opinion I'd like to bounce off you is this. Doesn't it feel like the Wolves reached their breaking point in the conference finals as far as too many guys were worn down? And now it feels like we're watching the exact same thing in some ways with Dallas. And like, this is the price to pay. It's 4 rounds of hell.
Well, so it's funny because we sat there, and Anthony Edwards he was the one leading the commentary, the self-awareness of, I've never really played 100 games in this season before, and now I know. So I'm going to go train for, it's the Michael Jordan train through July, basically, so that when everybody else is getting worn down by the 90th game, the 95th game,
right,
the 5th playoff run in a row over the course of 5 years, you're still running circles around them. And if that's, the Wolves felt heavy in the Western Conference Finals. They felt a half step slow, if not a full step slow. And Anthony Edwards didn't feel like the same player because they just scaled this mountain that they've never really scaled in franchise history, where you're knocking off the team to beat in the second round, the defending champion. But that's what the Mavericks look like right now too, where, okay, we made it through to the NBA Finals for the first time. Here we are.
Yep.
And, there's Ivan Drago from, it's like Rocky IV.
Yep.
I mean, Boston is no joke. Boston will fall asleep at the wheel. And you saw it last night. Boston goes up by 21 points. They hit a barrage of 3-pointers. Timeout with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. It looks like it's over. And then they just let their guard down. And they let you back in the game. But it looked like the Mavericks were just as exhausted. And Luka, like, again, we talk about Anthony Edwards needs to train harder and get to a point where he can play 100 games. Luka legitimately looks like the most out-of-shape player on the court. Yep. And he's so talented. He can still get off these shots and still score his points. But, it's hell, as you put it, these 2-month playoff grinds after an 82-game regular season. But it's Anthony Edwards, I don't think he's just lip service. I think when he says, now I know, and it won't be this way. Now, if we lose in the playoffs next year, it's not going to be because I got tired at the 98th game or whatever the math was. So, all right, do you want to speculate recklessly?
What day is it again?
Speculation.
It's a Reckless Speculation Thursday.
Well, then I think the answer is obvious.
So our old friend Joe Nelson, who runs Bring Me the News, put this recap together, and he went. So there's an Atlanta Hawks fan site. It's the Fan Nation All Hawks website or blog, and essentially what they're doing is they're putting together trade ideas for both Trae Young and Dejounte Murray. Bill Simmons went on his podcast, and this is how Joe leads the article here. I'll just read so you guys can get the flavor. Are the Atlanta Hawks seriously considering blowing up the Trae Young and Dejounte Murray backcourt? According to Bill Simmons, it's a possibility. Here's what Bill Simmons said. Some people seem to think both these guys are getting traded. That's a thing I've heard. He said this 3 days ago on his podcast, noting that he's heard from different people around the league who don't know each other, but who both know things about the inner workings of front offices. So 2 separate moles in the NBA have said, hey, the Hawks are looking at the top of the first round. They're looking at their situation. what were they, like 10 games below 500, even with Trae Young and Dejounte Murray.
Right.
It's just not working. Let's start over here. So the Fan Nation Atlanta Hawks page said, okay, let's start speculating on some trades. And they found one that involves the Timberwolves. And I think this one is super interesting. It's a 3-team trade. And by the way, this is just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg on the Karl-Anthony Towns speculation that's about to happen for the next month. Because I think July 6th is the day that, now trades can happen before then, but like free agency is July 6th. So we're sitting here, that's 3 weeks away. It's going to be 3 weeks of pre-draft and pre-NBA league year speculation. So here's what the trade would be. The Hawks would get Karl-Anthony Towns and the $200+ million over a half decade left on his contract. They would also get Marcus Smart from the Grizzlies. So they'd get a more defensive-minded sort of bulldog guard to put next to the defenseless Trae Young, who's not going to play much defense. So the Hawks get Cat and they get Marcus Smart. The Wolves get 6'5" ball handling point guard, combo guard Dejounte Murray. They would get wing shooter Bogdan Bogdanovic.
Oh, Bogdan. Yeah.
It's a 40% 3-point shooter right there who shoots 6 or 7 of them per game.
Knocks him down. Yep.
And the Wolves in this trade would also save like $7 million in salary. They'd be sending out $49 million. They'd be getting back $42 million. And so they'd potentially stay under that second luxury tax apron. The Grizzlies would get Clint Capella from the Hawks and Sacramento's 2025 first-round pick. Before I go into what this would look like for the Wolves in terms of like lineup rotation, if I remember correctly, 2 years ago, before the Wolves pulled the Rudy Gobert trade, we were doing these reckless speculation Thursdays on the Mackey and Judd show, the scoop sessions with Doogie. And Doogie for like 2 months was floating Dejounte Murray. Hey, I'm hearing the Wolves love Dejounte Murray. I don't know if that was it was right around the time Tim Connelly got hired. So I don't know if the steam started with, but Sachin Gupta was in the front office. I think he's a Dejounte Murray fan. But there was like Wolves Dejounte Murray steam before the Gobert trade from 2 years ago. Am I remembering that correctly?
I remember that. Yes. And I think it was Gerson. I think that was before Gerson was fired and was with Sachin, who's still there.
Okay.
I think you're right.
But Gerson got fired like at the beginning of that season. And then Gupta was the I think it was a Gupta driven thing, and he is still obviously in the Wolves front office. So that's not the first time we've heard the Dejounte Murray Wolves stuff. So here's what you would have. I think this is what they would do then. Naz Reid would slide into the starting lineup, and he'd become a 30+ minutes per game guy. He'd replace Karl-Anthony Towns. Dejounte Murray would be your starting point guard, 23 points a game. Good rebounder, by the way, because he's a 6'5" guard. We're not talking about like a 6 foot, 6'1".
Right.
You're talking 6'5". So you'd lose a little size from Cat to Naz, but you'd be adding one of the bigger point guards in the NBA, Dejounte Murray. Good rebounder, 6 to 7 assists per game. He can knock down threes slightly above league average, but he is a great mid-range player. That sort of paint out to like 15 feet. He's 50% from that range. Just a 3-level scorer who makes his money in the mid-range. So those guys would be in your starting lineup, along with Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert. And your bench would be Mike Conley, playing 20 minutes a game, 25 minutes a game.
Sure.
Bogdanovic off the bench.
Can knock down some threes. Yep.
Nikhil Alexander-Walker off the bench. And then whoever else you would then squeeze in with your other moves. Maybe you bring back, I don't know if you bring Kyle Anderson back. His autistic child is doing well in school. Does he come back on something closer to a league minimum deal? But then you've got, like, does Monte Morris come back? You got your Jalen Clarks, your Josh Minetz. Right. Does this open up a lane for Luka Garza to get 10, 15 minutes experimentally? But your 8 core players, if this trade went through, would be starting lineup of Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, Dejounte Murray, Jaden McDaniels, with Mike Conley, Bogdanovic, and Nikhil Alexander-Walker as the 3 main guys off your bench. Color me interested.
And this would get you below the second apron? The 7
depending on what you would
I'd be
do with,
curious.
because you could yes, I think this would help you stay below the second apron.
Okay.
We'd have to get our resident capologist in here, a Doogie or a Dane Moore, to help us with the
Bobby
actual
Marks.
market.
Get Doogie's guy Marks.
Bobby Marks. Yeah.
Guy's a former cap guy himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely intrigues me. And, the cat thing is, to your point, it's not going to slow down here. It's going to pick up. Now, I did see an interesting thing. I forget what podcast. I don't think it was an ESPN sanctioned one, but Brian Windhorst was on a podcast that I saw floating around in the last couple of days, in which he talks about the challenges of trading cat, not because teams don't want cat, but because of the fact that whoever inherits that contract is taking on some of the exact same problems that the Timberwolves are going to have because of said contract.
Yeah.
But that being said, I don't think it's going to slow the potential for talks. And we also have to realize that, with Conley, with Tim Conley, we're dealing with a guy who made one of the biggest trades in recent NBA history with the Gobert trade.
Yeah.
So I don't think we could put anything beyond him and say, oh, he doesn't make that type of trade. I mean, he definitely does.
Yes.
And the Mike Conley replacement really intrigues me because I think it needs to be done probably now. And the last thing is, if you recall, among the things that Doogie talked about a year ago was the fact that cat conversations, in his opinion, were not going to be that prevalent last summer, but they would be prevalent this coming off season now. And so I do think that we are in for a ton of speculation. Does it get done? Because I think the one thing is,
Reckless Speculation.
the one thing we're going to be faced with, I think, or the Wolves are going to be faced with here too, is the desire to trade cat perceived as a desire to trade a great player because you're trying to upgrade your team by an opponent, or is it seen as a potential salary dump of sorts where I'm not going to want to give you as much back because I'm doing you a favor by taking his contract? That's what I think is going to be extremely intriguing, because again, you are putting whatever team takes him in sort of the same financial jackpot potentially that you're in. So that's the one that I'm curious about. How would Cat being taken to market be received by potential suitors?
Yeah, I think, that's why a team like the Hawks is so interesting, because what they're currently doing isn't working. So they're looking for something different. And there's so many teams that make trades because they just need to try something different to get from 36 wins to 42 and become a playoff team. So if you look at it from Atlanta's perspective, and again, I guess I'd have to comb through and see, are they making this trade in this hype on this Hawks blog site? Is this a trade? But then there's like another Trae Young trade over here. But if you just traded Murray and you kept Trae Young, now you've got two electric offensive players, one as a guard, one as a big. You could play him at the 4 or the 5, Karl-Anthony Towns. So you'd have Trae Young and Karl-Anthony Towns as these unicorn offensive players and the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
To draft somebody, whoever you think, I don't think there's a locked in bona fide number 1 here, but it's not the strongest top of the draft compared to some other years. But you'd have these two pieces that are both in their 20s still and the number 1 overall pick. And now you feel like, okay, we're trying something different. We've got this young piece to the puzzle. And I want to get to real quick what the Timberwolves, because as much as, we tend to rip on Karl-Anthony Towns over the years on this podcast and other podcasts, he is one of the main reasons why you got to the Western Conference Finals. You don't just trade him to try something different. You don't just I need to know, what am I getting? What I need door number 2 to be wide open so I can stare inside of it before I'm making that trade. Mm-hmm. And so let's just do a quick evaluation of what the Wolves will be getting after we shout out our friends over at EcoFun Motorsports. 2 locations in the Twin Cities, one in Forest Lake, one in Burnsville. Your summertime fun headquarters: scooters, motorcycles, ATVs, side-by-sides, electric bikes. Also, at the Forest Lake location, watercraft. This is the Sports Dad's watercraft right here. You can see in our high-definition cameras him playing volleyball with his friends and family.
Yep.
In his pond behind his house.
It's a weekend.
Yeah, just a normal weekend.
Just a normal Saturday for Sports Dad.
Yep. So if you want to get out and have fun either on the water or the pavement, EcoFun's for you. EcoFunMotorsports.com. You can stop by their Forest Lake location and or their Burnsville location and tell them that SKOR North and or Flagrant Howls sent you in. So again, what would you be getting? You're not just going to trade Cat to trade Cat. That would be foolish because he is one of the better offensive players in the league. We have seen some limit. Like the Wolves don't have a true consistent second guy that can attack off the dribble. So that's the one thing. Like if I'm trading Cat, I need to replace his offense and ideally even get more offensive potential back while not fully sacrificing defense either. So it's a big ask. But if you look at this, Dejounte Murray isn't the most efficient offensive player. But guess what he can do? He can initiate. He can dribble drive. He can get his own shots from three in the paint. He can get his own looks and then distribute. So he's much more of a creator for himself and for his teammates than Karl is. Mm-hmm. Is he overall as efficient and as high ceiling of an offensive player? Is he going to drop 60 points? Like, probably not on that level. But if you're looking at what the Celtics are doing to the Mavericks, it's a bunch of dudes that can just initiate and dribble and move around and get their own looks or create looks for other players on the floor. So you get that. And also you'd be getting one of the better three-point shooting wing players in the league in Bogdanovic, who has 3 years left on his contract. And Dejounte Murray, by the way, also has 3 years left on his contract with a player option in 2027-28 for like $20 million less than Karl-Anthony Towns makes. He's making $25, $27, $29, and $31 million over the next few seasons. Mm-hmm. And he's 10 years younger than Mike Conley. So you're getting a Mike Conley replacement.
Yep.
You're getting a guy that can initiate offense more than Karl can. And you're getting a spot-up shooter in the trade to sort of help replace the three-point shooting you'd be losing with Karl-Anthony Towns and increasing Naz Reid's minutes from 24 minutes a game to, say, 32, 33 minutes a game.
And you're helping Ant through all of that as well, which to me is probably the most important thing. Because like when we say it's a little bit of a nebulous term probably, but when we say this is Ant's team, and I think the reaction fairly is, what does that mean exactly? It means that at the end of the day, you're trying to build a team that will help him as much as possible. Like he's the linchpin. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's intriguing. It's intriguing. Now I'm not sure. Unfortunately, with the Hawks, I'm not sure what their goal is. I do think that they're going to make trades.
Yeah.
And they're such a weird franchise because they've been up and down and they've never had really true success of late, but they have had good pop-up years. But yeah, I think this is the type of trade that definitely would have to intrigue you. And again, I'll go back to this. Tim Conley has made shocking deals. So you can't just dismiss this and be like, well, reckless speculation Thursday, but it would never happen. I think the Gobert trade is about as far, the Gobert trade is the one where you're like, well, that's not going to happen. And then it happens.
And it does.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of fun when you have a general manager or president of basketball operations that can just strike at any time with any trade.
Now that we've had some time to allow it to breathe, what do you think? And I know the statistics are not kind because there's a drop-off. But, judging from his entire game, which was 2 really great rounds, especially defensively against Durant and then Joker, what do we think playoff Karl is? Like taking his whole game, so not just the points, because that's not complimentary. But like, what do we think? Because, we continue to say it, and it's true, you can't dismiss those first 2 rounds, but you also can't take the Western Conference Finals against Dallas and dismiss that. So who is playoff Cat?
Well, let me respond to your question with my own question. Do you consider 32 playoff games over 4 different playoff seasons over 7 different NBA seasons?
It's a large sample size.
Is that a large enough? Can you draw conclusions?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, because we've seen good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
you've seen the whole. You've seen.
Yes.
Well, I was gonna say you've seen the whole Karl experience. But you know what you haven't seen? You haven't seen the peak version of Cat, like the Cat that can drop 40, 50, 60 points on a bad team.
Right.
You don't see now. I mean, obviously, you're playing the best teams in the world in the playoffs. It's harder to drop 40 or 50 points, even if you're Luka or Kyrie. It's hard to get your shot off.
And you
But-
did see peak defensive Cat. Like those first two rounds were at times incredible as well. So I think it's fair to judge.
But if we both agree that 32 games is enough of a sample at this point, I mean, is it going to be that much different if you give him 32 more games? Is he going to all of a sudden balance it out by... So his regular season versus postseason to this point. Regular season career, 23 points a game. Postseason, 19 points. So a 4-point reduction in the postseason. Field goal percentage. Cat in the regular season, a 52% shooter from the field. Playoffs, 46%. It's not terrible, but a 5-6% drop. 3-point shooter, regular season, career, 40%. Greatest shooting 7-footer in the history of basketball. Dirk Nowitzki stands would fight you, but he's on the Mount Rushmore. So 40% regular season from 3, 35% postseason. And then even some of the other stuff, like his foul rate goes up in the playoffs. His turnover rate is about equal. Rebounds per game, pretty flat. But like his defense I would say his defense was still there even against the Mavs. Like he'll grab you rebounds. He's a big body. But he can't get, I think to answer your question, what do we make of playoff Cat? He can't get his offense in the postseason the way that he can in the regular season. He can't. And there's a lot of great players in the NBA who also struggle to get the same looks, but they find a way to get to the free throw line or they find a way to score in other ways. I don't think it's a coincidence that Anthony Edwards' numbers go up in the postseason based on the type of player and demeanor that we're talking about, and that Karl's performance dips. I don't think that's a small sample size coincidence. What do you do with that information? Do you use it and say, well, we got to bail entirely and trade him for 50 cents on the dollar? Do you look to keep him, but find someone, some way, somehow working into the fabric of the salary cap to like slot between him and Anthony Edwards as an offensive option? Can you even make that work financially? Or do you have to pull a trade like the one we're talking about where you say goodbye to him and creatively get something back that boosts your offense and doesn't hurt your defense too much? So
I think everything you do now, also, especially with Ant, he's going to be 23 next season. So he's not old, but he definitely now has really valuable experience. And like, he now gets what a run looks like. Like, I don't think that this is wait till he's 26. I think this is a window, no question about it. Here's my thing. Everything that Tim Connelly does now has to be looked at through a playoff prism, not a regular season prism. It should be a given that this team now, and I know this sounds weird with the Wolves, but that they're going to make the playoffs, right? That they're going to be a competitive regular season team. That this should no longer be can you make the play in? I mean, they proved that this year. So I literally would look at everything through the prism of a championship one, which is, do we have the ingredients? And this is a fine dance. Do we have the ingredients to be a championship team?
yeah, and I think part of this equation too is because again, you're not dealing with unlimited resources. If there was no salary cap, cool. All right, Cat definitely takes a step back in the playoffs offensively, but he's still a player that we want on the team, spacing the floor. So let's spend above and beyond where we can.
Right.
And I just think you have to make a really hard decision. Can you live with a lesser version of Cat in the playoffs? Or is there still hope that he can be a fuller version of himself offensively? Do you have enough initiators of offense on this team? If you don't, when you compare it to Mavericks, to Celtics, can you get another initiator of offense without trading Karl-Anthony Towns? Like, I'm sure they have whiteboards full of these questions inside that building right now.
Can you financially make that work too?
Well, you could if you traded, like, this is where it gets, like, if you traded Jaden McDaniels, you could get another initiator of offense that, but then you're losing the best perimeter defender or one of them in the NBA. And so are you going to sacrifice that level of defense for someone that can get some offense? Like, is your team better? Probably not.
Do you see Cat being a key cog, because he would have to be, on a team that is dancing around the court with the LOB trophy in the middle of the court on a table?
I don't think he is the second cog on that team. Could I see him if like Porzingis might be dancing around with Boston.
Yep.
And he's like the fourth or fifth cog, and now he's injured.
But I don't think it's realistic to have that conversation regarding the Wolves with Cat's salary. That's the
Agreed.
problem.
It's tough.
Like, I get your point. Yes, it'd be great if you could just say, Cat, you're the fourth guy. But I don't know there's a path.
Yep. It's really tough. There's more too. We'll carve some time next week for sure. There's some Knicks stuff out there.
I was just going to say, wait till the Knicks stuff is coming. Because as long as we have the New York Post, Reckless Speculation Thursday has an ally.
Yes, it does.
Reckless speculation.
A little Reckless Speculation Thursday for you guys here on Flagrant Howls. He's the sports dad. I'm Phil Mackey, and this is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.